Welcome to Specific Love. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this beautiful coffee table really inexpensively that also has a secret feature. We have some hidden storage right below. It's really easy to open and also really easy to close. Let's begin. With all the stuff going on in the world, lumber prices have shot through the roof. So with those high expenses, I wanted to see if I can use some alternative pieces of wood, these are furring strips, to make an awesome coffee table. So let's try this. Now I know furring strips are not normally good pieces of wood, but if you look through the pile real carefully, a lot of times you can find some really nice pieces. So keep that in mind. We're gonna first start by cutting down the furring strips into 42-inch long sections. I need 4 of these large pieces and 3 of the smaller. Alright, this is a good time to test fit everything, and it's looking pretty good. This will be the time to do any sanding if you need to. Now that we have all the wood prepped in, just before we add color, I need a way to attach all of these together easily. And I'm going to be using pocket screws. So, got to drill a bunch of holes, and I'm going to do it about every 6 inches. Now that we have the holes drilled, it's time to add some color. For these smaller pieces, I'm actually going to burn them. I got a propane tank here, so we're going to take this outside. We're going to char this up real nicely. Let's go do that. Now that these are nice and black, I'm going to take a wire brush and gently go across all this just to knock off any scale that might be there. Then I'm going to take a rag and just gently wipe off any excess as well. Now that we have the color of the small boards burned in, we're going to take the larger boards and we're going to be staining them a traditional cherry. Now while we let that stain dry, I'm going to start on the legs. And to do that, I'm going to take a couple more of the furring strips. We're actually going to glue these together. This is cut at 15.5 inches. That should give us a nice good height. And then once we glue everything together here, it should give us about 1.5 inches across, give or take. So we're going to cut this in half, and then we should get 2 legs per set. We're actually going to make 2 sets of these. So let's get on that. Now while those legs are drying, I'm going to cut out a few more pieces out of the 4-inch furring strip so we can start on the frame. Alright, for the front and back of the table, I'm using 39-inch long pieces. And for the outsides, I went with 15.5. Now I need a total of 4 of these. 2 on the total outside need to be in really good shape, as you can see here. But the ones going in the middle here, they do not necessarily have to be very nice. In fact, you can see some bad imperfections there. They'll be under the table. You won't see them anyway. So to hold all this together, I'm going to be using pocket screws. So let's start drilling. And here's what each of the boards should look like. You have 2 holes going into the outer pieces and 3 across, which will be the top here. Now the longer boards will have a couple extra, but pretty much the same way. Now if by chance you have any knots in your wood, like I do right here, and this one's loose, you might want to put a little bit of glue on the inside of the frame so it doesn't fall out. And for the sides of the table, I was planning on burning this, but I wanted to give you a different idea to use just in case you don't feel comfortable with that. If you take some satin black paint and you hold the wood away from the paint as you're spraying it, because you just want a real light coat of black on it, it'll come out to a very similar outcome. Of course, it won't be truly burned, but at least it'll get something close. Now this one was painted, and this one was burned. If you didn't already know, could you tell the difference? Now it's time to head back over to the tabletop. Now that this had some time to dry, we're going to carefully flip all of these over, making sure to keep everything in alignment that we had before, and then we're going to assemble with the screws. It's a good idea to create a stop block. In this case, I'm using a 2x4 that I have in line with my workbench so that I know when I'm attaching the first 2 boards, they will be square. And it's also a good idea to add some clamps and some weight to keep your wood from moving around. Alright, let's flip this over. Oh yeah, that is looking awesome. Now that we have this all screwed together, it is looking awesome. But at this point, I need to put a layer of protection across this. And not just for the table, but for everything that touches the table. It gets this black soot from the burnt wood all over everything. So I'm gonna put a layer of epoxy across this. Definitely not thick. This is just gonna be lightly brushed on. Maybe in a few of the small divots, I might put it in a little bit deeper so that it just has a little bit more of a surface to it. But otherwise, we're just gonna protect it and go from there. And in case you're thinking, epoxy, that is expensive stuff. You don't have to use epoxy on this. You can do a few layers of lacquer or polyurethane across it. I'm just using epoxy because that's what I have on hand. But you use whatever you can to make sure you protect the table and yourself. Now I've let this epoxy cure for over 24 hours, and if you look right in here, it's a little hard to catch with the camera, but there's a bunch of imperfections here and here, and it's just rough to the touch. So I'm gonna take some 400 grit sandpaper, go over this entire table, and then repeat the pouring process. Now while I'm letting the tabletop cure again, I'm moving back over to the legs that we glued together earlier. Now first I'm going to rip these directly in half, and then I'm going to try and rip off each of the sides, making this as square as possible to about 1.5 inches, give or take. So let's do that. Now that we have these all cut to the correct width, I'm going to go back and trim off just a little bit on each end to get rid of some of this glue squeeze out and make sure it's nice and square. Now after I cut the table legs, I went back and decided to just do some quick measurements to the length and the width. Especially since the tabletop is already preset, we wanted to make sure everything else fit to that size. And I've noticed that the length and the width of these are just a tad too long. So I'm going to go back to each of the legs and I'm going to trim off probably about 1/8 of an inch off of each side, and that way we can get it to within specs. Alright. Now that I have this cut to specs and everything is lined up, I want to go back and cut an additional dado in each of the legs. That's because I'm going to create a side support that goes between these two legs and these two. And then I'm going to create one additional one that goes across the middle. Now I'm going to be using one of the small furring strips for the supports, and to do that I have measured out the width here on this leg, and now I need to set the blade to the depth. I'm going to be using everything right here on my table saw sled to make sure everything is nice and straight. Now that I have the dados cut in each of the legs, I cut the support pieces to length, but I need a dado in each of these, so let's do that as well. And once I had those dados cut, I cut one more piece to be that center support. And now that we have everything cut to size, I'm going to stain these legs a cherry color and paint the support arms black. Now it's time to start assembling everything. I'm going to first start off with these center pieces, and the reason why is that'll secure both the front and back together, and that way when I start attaching the legs, I don't have to worry about everything moving around. Now that the legs are installed, we're going to insert the supports here. And to attach these, I'm going to be using some drywall screws. I normally would not recommend these, but since they're black and this isn't really supporting any weight, this should work fine. And with this type of screw, I strongly recommend pre-drilling all your holes. And to install this last piece that goes the full width of the table, I'm going to be drilling a hole here in the bottom and adding a screw. Alright, let's flip this thing over and see how straight it is. Oh yeah, that's looking good. Now for any normal coffee table, this would be almost ready to add the top and put on display. But I want to add a nice hidden compartment to this table, so let's get started on that. Now the hidden compartment is going to be in this center section, so let's measure this out. It's 12.5 all the way across and 15.5. So 12.5 by 15.5, let's cut that out. Now for the door of this compartment, I'm going to be using 3/4 inch plywood. I know this is a variance on just the furring strips, and you can still do that if you'd like. You can glue a bunch side by side, but this will save some time and it probably will be less likely to work. Now for a quick little test fit. Yeah, that should work in there great. Remember, if you're building this, you need a little bit of room between everything so when it opens and closes, it doesn't bind at all. And to hold this in place, I'm going to use a couple 2-inch hinges right here on the edge. Now that we have the hinges on the door, I need to add some spacing in here, so I'm going to add a couple 2x4 cutoffs that I have. And that should give a good 1.5 inch thickness to whatever compartment we need in there. And then we're gonna drop this inside and see how that looks. Awesome. In fact, it looks like we still have a little bit of room here. And so I'm gonna take this back out very carefully if I can. And we're gonna add some additional spacers. Got some craft sticks here. We're gonna add these on top of the 2x4s just to try and space it up so we can have as much room in the compartment as possible, but still keeping it hidden. And that is pretty close, so we're gonna go with that. Now I marked where I want the hinges to go, and I'm gonna be pre-drilling this because whenever you're working with furring strips, especially with screws, you could easily crack it. So make sure you pre-drill and mark on your drill so you know how far to go so you don't go too far and punch out the other side. And to help minimize the door from flopping back and forth while I'm trying to install it, I'm gonna add a corner square right here on the inside, and that just hopefully limit the movement. Here's a little preview. Oh yeah, that's gonna work perfect. Now to make the latch, I'm actually just gonna use a basic nail with a large head on it here. Now I'm gonna drill a hole through the side panel. We're going to insert the nail. Then the door, we're gonna make a little divot in it, and the nail will actually latch onto the door. To open it, you push in a little bit on the door, push in on the nail, and then the door will then swing open. To reverse the process, just push the door in, push the nail in from the outside, and you can latch it back. Now, on the outside out here, yes, you will be able to see the nail. When the nail is pushed in, it will be protruding out. But once it's pushed in and we have everything measured on the inside, I'm then gonna cut the nail off on the outside and paint it black, and you shouldn't be able to ever see it. Now before I cut off the nail and get everything prepped, let's give it a shot. We're gonna push up on the door, out on the nail, and there it goes. Now to reverse the process, we're gonna push up on the door a little bit. The nail may have to be wiggled around a little bit in there to find the exact spot, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be a quick, immediate process to set everything back up. Now we're ready to go. Now here's a shot from the underside so you can see what's going on. Push up on the door, push in on the nail, and then the door swings down. Reverse the process, you push up on the door, push in on the nail, and you're set. And with another light coating of paint, you wouldn't notice it if you didn't know it was right there. Now to help protect this base just a little bit better, I'm going to use a can of spray-on polyurethane, and that should just protect this from any kind of drinks or liquids that might get spilled on it. Now while the outside was drying, I added a little ledge here. It's a little stop so you can put stuff up in here and it's less likely for it to slide all the way out. Now something else that can be added to here is maybe a chain to keep this from going so far down. But fortunately with this piece of wood that I have going across, it creates a nice little resting point and I don't really need that. But if you'd like, you can always add those pieces. Now a great addition to this would be a piece of foam, maybe with a cutout. Just say for home defense. YouTube has gotten real restrictive on exactly what you can say and show without causing issues, but I'm sure when I say home defense, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, imagine you're in your living room, somebody tries to break open the door. Within a second or two, that's open, and now they have something to worry about. Now let's just say you don't want it for that exact reason, but rather maybe you want to hide cash or your passports or money or whatever you'd like. It's cool to have a little storage area in an obvious place that nobody would ever know. Now at this point, let's get that top on so this really pops. Now I built this table for my son's new apartment. I'm pretty sure he's going to love it. He doesn't even know I'm building it for him, so it's gonna be a big surprise. Overall, this is a great table that anyone can build. You just keep it simple and you'll have fun doing it. So I hope you can get out in your shop and have fun building. 1/2 inches wide. I'm gonna be using made this beautiful coffee table. Okay, furring strips. all the wood ready. I don't